Hello and welcome back to the Wargamer and a second Rune Wars tutorial. This time I'll be tackling the Daqan Spearmen and I'll be using the Army Painter range of paints to do so. After cleaning and assembling the miniature, the first task is to prime it, and for this I've used a grey spray primer as this will really help when painting the blues and whites in later steps. After priming, the first area of the miniature I'll be painting will be the blue areas, and we'll start off with the base coat of Viking Blue. Now when applying your base coat, I would recommend creating a mixture of 2 parts paint to 1 part water, and applying at least 2 thin down coats, as this will give you a really nice solid base colour in which to build up from in later steps. With the base coat achieved, the next step is to start applying some shading into the recesses and scuffs in the armour, and for this I'll be applying a wash of blue Tane Ink. Applying this wash straight out of the pot may be a little bit too strong, so I'd recommend creating a mixture of 1 part ink to 1 part water and applying this over all the blue areas we painted in the previous step. Once the ink is dried, the next step is to apply a highlight of Troglodyte Blue over the blue areas of the miniature. To highlight, simply take a very small amount of paint on the tip of your brush and lightly drag it along the edges of the armour. Some areas of the miniature will require a small amount of freehand, as you'll need to draw a parallel line against the armour trim. The next step in painting our spearmen is to paint both the shaft of the spear and also the fur around the waist, and we're painting all of these areas using fur brown. With the base coat completed, the next step is to wash over the areas we painted in the previous step using light Tane Ink. Now the reason we use a particular ink on this miniature is because it's light enough not to darken the colour too much, but just dark enough to pull into those recesses and help to bring out the detail. The final step in painting both the fur and the wood is to highlight it using troll claws. For the fur, you simply just want to use a very small amount of paint on the tip of your brush to lightly pick out the tips of the strands of fur. The next area of the miniature that I'll be painting will be the leather areas. This includes the gloves and also the boots, and I'll be painting all of these areas with a base coat of leather brown. With the base coat completed, the next step is to wash over the leather areas using strong Tane Ink. Now we want to make sure that this wash gets into all those crevices and recesses, as this will really help to bring out the detailing in these areas. Once the wash has dried, we'll now be finishing off the leather areas by applying a highlight of Monster Brown. Now to highlight, remember just to take a small amount of paint on the tip of your brush and pick out some of the raised features in these areas. For example, around the hand I'll be picking out the knuckles and also the fingers, as well as any folds that may be in the cloth itself. In this next step, I'll also be painting some more leather areas, but this time I'll be focusing on the leather straps around the armour on the legs and also around the shield handle as well. I'll be painting all of these areas, first of all, with dark stone. In this next step, I'll now be applying a thin edge highlight of Werewolf Fur to the leather straps we painted in the previous step. Now I'd recommend creating a mixture of roughly 2 parts paint to 1 part water, as this will give you much better control of the paint when applying it to the miniature. With the leather areas completed, I'll now be focusing on the white cloth emanating from the spearman's waist. Now I want to start off with a light base coat, first of all using Spaceship Exterior to paint over the entirety of this area. Now remember to create a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water and applying at least 2 thin down coats. To finish off the cloth, I'll now be applying a layer of matte white over the cloth areas we painted in the previous step. However, you want to make sure you leave the darker Spaceship Exterior visible in the recesses and simply use the paint to pick out some of the raised sections. Again, creating a mixture of 1 part paint to 1 part water will really assist you in applying this matte white. The next area of the miniature that I'll be tackling will be the face. Now I'll be using a base coat of tanned flesh, first of all, in order to get that basic skin tone on the miniature. Now that we have a base coat of tanned flesh, the next step is to apply some highlights of Barbarian Flesh. I'm going to be picking out some of the facial features here, such as the bridge of the nose, the lips and also the cheekbones as well. In order to tie the 2 previous layers together, I'll now be applying some flesh wash over the skin areas. This will not only help to bring the 2 previous colours together, but it will help to enhance the shading in the recesses. With the matte areas of the miniature completed, we can now start work on the metallic areas. Now first of all, I'm going to be tackling the silver metallic areas, and I'll be using plate mail metal for this. This includes the tip of the spear and also the scale mail on the arms as well. With the base coat completed, the next step is to wash over the plate mail metal areas using dark Tane Ink. This wash will pool into those recesses, help to bring out the detail, but also slightly darken the colour of the metal as well, which will enhance our next highlight. To finish off painting the silver metallic areas of the miniature, I'll now be applying a highlight of shining silver. Now we want to apply this over the edges of the blade itself, but also picking out some of the individual scales on the scale mail on the arms. The final area in painting our miniature is to tackle the gold areas. Now there are quite a lot of areas on this miniature that need to be painted gold, and for this I'll be using greedy gold. When painting with metallics, I would recommend taking your time, as if you overspill it can be quite difficult to cover up the areas that you spilt over onto. For this I would recommend using a small brush with just a small amount of paint on the tip of that brush, and this will help to alleviate any spillage problems. Now that we have a greedy gold base colour, we want to darken it down slightly. It's a little bit too bright at this point in time. So I'm going to be applying a wash of strong tone ink again over the gold areas, making sure that it pools into the recesses and doesn't overspill onto the areas that we've already painted in previous steps. With the wash completed, you can see the gold areas are looking a lot darker now. We want to bring out some of the detail in these areas by applying a highlight of bright gold. Again, you want to focus this highlight on the hard edges of the gold areas, but also use it to pick out some of the rivets and studs on these areas as well. And here we have the completed Daqan Spearmen, who you can see I've also based. Now whilst I focus on the Daqan Spearmen in this tutorial, you could apply the exact same colours and techniques used in this video to many of the other Daqan units. Now if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below, and also make sure you subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my future content. If you would like to follow what projects I'm currently working on, you should definitely check out both my Facebook and Instagram pages, which you can find links to in the description below. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's you guys who make these tutorials possible. If you would also like to help me in producing these videos, you can do so by checking out my Patreon page. From there you can donate to me from as little as $1 a month, which will just really help me in producing future content, and you can find a link to my Patreon page in the description below. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching and goodbye.